Okay, well, as here we are, late into the night, early into the morning, continuing our speculation. We're amped. We're fired up.
We are.
We feel inspired because we know what's going on in New Zealand right now is pure magic. That J.A. Bayona has either completed or is close to completing his time and work on LOTR on Prime. Jeez. He rushes 99 yards and fumbles on the goal line for a turnover lose the Super Bowl.
Is
Nice
it
job,
Plum
Wayne.
or is what's going on here?
I don't know.
They changed their name on us?
We know Plum. Amazon Plum. Order all the plums you want. We know that they are creating magic right now, and somehow it's filtering through Middle Earth itself, through the core, the planet core, all the way to this side of the earth in Amanda, Ohio, the Shire of America, and to the North Farthing up in Mount Vernon. But we're filled with dreams of elven warfare and Valar deception, right? Much like on Christmas, we're thinking about sugar plum fairies and jolly old St. Nicholas. That's what we're thinking about. We feel the energy across the world, which is incredible. Like, we know that what is happening is pure magic. So that's led, you talked or you spoke in your speculation on Ismael as Erfarazon, that there is a visual that came to your mind. And I've had some similar visuals come to my mind and we were talking about this. It's fascinating. This is we've been talking about this show for 2.5, almost 3 years. The entire time this podcast, an unexpected podcast, has been around, we have had Drop and Eaves, which has now moved to YouTube, where we talk about any show news, any development, and we think about the show, but not until now have I had visuals pop into my mind. You?
Yeah. No,
is
seriously.
This the first time?
Yeah, it was the first. Just 2 weeks ago when we had started this whole thing and we got the ball rolling. And I was actually leaving your house after a recording, and I was heading to my buddy Tom's.
Let's go. Come on.
Two of my best buddies who I've talked about Lord of the Rings with for years.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but to think about it. And I was like, we had sung the songs the night before, and we were singing songs out of The Hobbit. And I was like, and I just started. I started singing some of those songs. I thought how funny it was. We did the silly Elvish song as we're going into Rivendell.
Yeah.
And then it got more serious. I started thinking about like Numenor. And I started thinking about the kings, and I started thinking about song and the power of song and how this world was sung into creation and being. And I was like, they've got to do something like this. And now we're talking, I don't know how you want to do this, but if we're just jumping into what could be.
We're just going to do episode 1 to rule them all. We are going to speculate on how do we punt, how do we kick off into this brand new adventure into Middle Earth. How does episode 1 begin? What happens in these? Because J.A. Bayona is, at least as far as we know, has been confirmed to direct the first 2 episodes. We're going to talk about him in another video and just his the diversity of his career and in what he's produced.
Yeah.
Everything from documentaries to big commercial movies like Jurassic World to horror films like The Orphanage. He's amazing, and he's a true artist. But so we know that he's in charge of bringing us into this world in terms of a directorial perspective. So how is that going to unfold? How is that going to happen? So do you want to kick off? I've had a couple of visuals.
I've had a couple visuals myself.
Get into it, baby. Walk us into it.
Let's go. I have a couple. So let's go back and forth. I'll do, because I've kind of changed
I like this
a little bit since we started recording tonight. I've actually been thinking more about what you've said when we did our Farazan video.
You better not take mine.
No, well, I don't know.
Don't you feel the same way?
I'm worried.
Don't take mine.
So all I know is I want season 1, episode 1, to start off with a sense of urgency.
Okay, all right.
Right?
Impetus. We need an impetus. Yes.
Right. I have a feeling if you just brought me into a circular stone table and you had Gil-galad and Elrond and Galadriel, and you had our big players around a table, war table, talking about the defeat. Right? You started. I mean, like we get right into Annatar. Annatar has us on the ropes, and this came from our last video where I was visualizing, like I'm visualizing these refugees as you said. And so I sometimes think people think because in the last video I said you could build to that and show us these refugees on the run. You could start with we're beaten, we've lost. You don't see Annatar. You see Sauron. You don't even know. What you see is this dark. You see him in his Sauron form.
This is
right.
Mine is like almost the opposite. This is so cool. This is so cool.
Because to me, like that's you're trying to think of then what caught, because then you are closer to the start of the beginning of the Second Age, closer, not as close as maybe I think people want to go, because again, it's what happens in that moment right there. Is the preservation. Círdan the shipwright is there. The three rings must be taken, and they must be saved, and they must be kept from the Dark Lord, right? I mean, like, so there's an urgency out the gate. What will we do? Where should we go? And what we're gonna build towards is I mean, I like you start with this, and there's a hope that the Númenóreans, that men will come to their aid. How different is that, right? In our terms of thinking, we're always thinking the elves are coming to our aid or something. Someone's going to aid some, and you need the Númenóreans to show up at some point and get in there, because they're on the ropes. This battle goes on for a long time, where they're fighting. But just to see,
decades. The War of Wrath is a long, and that's something else I hadn't realized until we dove a little deeper. It goes on a long time, and also just a quick aside, it was interesting to see, and we'll get into this when we get into Silmarillion. It was interesting to see how that war decimated Beleriand, right?
Yeah,
like moved mountains, destroyed rivers.
Oh yeah,
like,
that was
And I think that is Tolkien. At least in my mind, I'm making the correlation between that and remember when we saw, what was the Peter Jackson film? Oh my gosh, the World War I documentary.
Oh yeah, the
once we're, Jeezy cow.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
Dadgummit.
That was a good film.
Again, fumbles at the goal line. That's great.
Yeah,
but Peter Jackson had all these excerpts from soldiers, and we saw visually how that portion of the border in France, the
they
front,
shall not grow old.
They shall not grow old.
Yeah.
That entire part of the world was changed.
Right.
Was changed by warfare, and how that horrified Tolkien, this lover of nature, this individual who made friends with trees, that the very concept that we could create machines that change the world and destroy hundreds of thousands of not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds of miles of landscape, that is reflected in the War of Wrath is very, very interesting. But yes, long time, a long battle, not one or two, decades of warfare.
Yeah. It's so like you could show, and even these wars that happened, like, because there's numerous ones, right? I mean, there's like, sometimes I think we think it's like, oh, it just happened right then and there and it was over. But like when you look back in the histories, they happen over sometimes several years, decades, as you said. So depending on where we're at, like you could see us mid-war and you could get us right into the urgency or the tail end of something. And then from there, if you're dividing the rings, like that would be, I mean, that or you're seeing maybe Elrond taking survivors or whatever it might be. I think that would be just a cool visual. I don't know where it would work exactly, but it was kind of a visualization of like, how do we just jump into this? And then you still preserve Annatar's form, and you don't ever see, that's someone who we could work on later. I think,
and almost deceive us as an audience as well.
Yeah, because
especially individuals who don't know the lore and don't know that Annatar is Sauron. Right. Spoiler alert there. But a lot of people aren't going to know that. They're going to come into the show going, wow, okay, cool. So I can root for this guy. And then to be deceived by him in the same way that most of Middle Earth is deceived by him. That's actually one of my ideas for how we could break into this.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Season as well. So I have another one first. So
Okay.
there was an evolution for mine that because I fell in love with this idea of, and it's pure nostalgia, okay? Because a big chunk of what got us into Fellowship of the Ring, at least for me, seeing the movies, getting me into Lord of the Rings in the first place, was that prologue. And the climax of that prologue was the battle of the last alliance of men and elves, right? Against Sauron, the end of the Second Age, beginning of the Third Age, the cutting of the ring, that drama that happened, the slaying of Gil-galad, the rise of Elrond, all these things that, in a Second Age show, you could build towards that. That could be your end. Sure. It would take forever, and you might have to abridge certain sections or find a way to change the way pacing and time works, but you could build towards that end. So ever since we started thinking about Second Age, and me educating myself a little bit and going and doing some research without having read the Silmarillion on what exactly happens in the Second Age, and then looking even more closely at, okay, what is the end of the First Age, beginning of the Second Age, and could there also be a prologue like entry into this show? Could we start right at the beginning of the Second Age?
Yeah.
Now, part of what has sort of like made me think, they're not going to be able to do that, is they don't have permission from the Tolkien estate. They don't have the rights to touch anything in the First Age. And technically, the War of Wrath, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, I love that, because I don't know most of what I'm talking about. This is all brand new territory for me. The end of the First Age was the War of Wrath, and it had to do with the defeat of Morgoth and the banishing into the void. And that's kind of when those ages separated. In the same way that the Second and Third Age are divided by the cutting of the ring, and the way the Third and the Fourth Age are separated by the destruction of the ring by Frodo, or Gollum, I guess technically, if you think about it. So I thought to myself, I was like, okay, how can... So you can't touch most of the War of Wrath, I'm assuming, because it's still kind of, as it's ongoing, it's still in the First Age. Tolkien estate might have an issue with that. So how do I maintain that desire to enter into the show the same way I entered into the Lord of the Rings, but not infringe on the rights? And this visual came to me as, I was like, okay, a vision of wreckage and carnage, desolation of Beleriand, or even further east as Morgoth was defeated and Sauron retreated, right? And the minions of Morgoth fled east to just... Because once Morgoth was defeated, they were freaked. They were scared, right? Yeah, even with Sauron being there, his second in command, it wasn't like having your big baddie, right?
No.
And we learned that about the forces of evil. When the head is struck, the body shivers and flees. So maybe it's a subsequent battle, and there's carnage and there's wreckage. And out of the rubble climbs a character. All right, maybe you see an arm reaching out, and there's wreckage everywhere. There's dragon fire that's still raining down, even though the dragons had, I think, kind of been defeated at this point. Whatever, take liberties. There's the cries of battle. There's death. There's blood. It's absolute destruction, right? And from this wreckage emerges a character. I don't know how it's done. I can't totally see it, but this character is the first person being we see in LOTR Prime. All right. And it's someone who we see as dark, but somehow there's a strain of elegance and nobility somehow elevated, right? And we see this individual wrestling with the realization that he has been defeated, and that the only way is towards repentance and redemption.
Wow.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah.
And so I was digging, and I was like, well, like, could this even happen? Is this like realistic enough? Or are people going to see that and go, that didn't really actually happen? That Anatar wasn't in that, Sauron wasn't in that situation, and we wouldn't have felt about him that way. If you go look on page 987 of the Silmarillion, you're going to see that it's not, that ain't canon, bro. All right. That ain't canon. So I thought, okay, how else could we do this? All right. So what if, because I'm fascinated with this perspective of Anatar Sauron. And I pretty much said this earlier, but what if we're introduced to Annatar, a character of light with a dark past, but still a character we're both entranced and captivated by, okay? Yeah. Just as most of Middle-earth was swindled by, tricked by, deceived by, right?
Yeah.
So we would be in the same shoes as most of all of Middle-earth, right? Tricked by Annatar. And for many who don't know the lore, this could work. You could actually have a pretty big reveal of, hey guys, this character you've been trusting this whole time, it's actually Sauron.
Right.
And I would love that. I'm thinking like me as a young viewer, as a kid, because we've talked about the show from the perspective of a younger audience, maybe getting into Middle-earth for the first time, maybe it being their Lord of the Rings. Like the twist that would be, the twist you could pull off. Because I don't know that many people, even when they think about Sauron, they also think there was also this angelic being of light that was hidden and locked away in there too. And you could pull off quite a reveal.
Yes.
Quite a reveal.
Yeah, so one of the things, I mean, after Morgoth is defeated, I mean, there is sort of whether it's a facade or whatever it might be, the reason he is also not crushed completely or bound or whatever is because of repentance, a slight nod towards repentance. Now, does not return to Valinor, doesn't do the whole thing, eventually goes and hides.
Slips away.
Yeah. But, and you know what my visual earlier, the reason I was kind of steering away from, like, I like this, because what I don't want to see, in one regard, I want to see Elrond in the same room with Annatar, and I want to see him. I want to see that. That would be really cool. But at the same time, for an audience who's not familiar with Annatar, they would immediately be clued in to, we trust Elrond. And if Elrond doesn't trust this guy, I ain't going to trust him. So
maybe you want to build to that. You want to build to that scenario.
Yeah, or you build
I still
to that
want
scenario.
To see it.
I still want to see it. But the other thing that you could do is you could show us later on. You could have Elrond speaking. Like he could be talking to, like, you could walk Annatar in to Celebrimbor, and they gladly accepted him. They were very happy to have him. They were entranced by him. He showed them things, and you could see them laughing and working on stuff and sharing information. It seems so positive, right? And then if you saw even once in season 1 or 2 or at some point, Elrond or Gil-galad say, I don't know, I'm not so sure. Be careful what you're getting into there. You could be delving too deep into, those magics or that spell work. I mean, that might not be. Where did he get his information from? How did he learn this? Have you ever asked him that? But like, I think that could be something later on, that those little clues where you're like, because you want people to buy in on him strong, and say, we like him. He's so good. Like he's helping out here. Why not? He can't be bad. And then you trickle in, oh, they're working on rings. Oh, this guy's...
Yeah. The other that would be the big giveaway, right? Like, oh, he's obsessed with rings.
One second, just real quick, I guess. So you have, at first, what you're trying to create is different types of irony, right? So you have this sort of like, I didn't see that coming with Annatar in the beginning. Then once we know who he is, when you get to Ar-Pharazôn, a king later on, you have dramatic irony. You have a shift where you go, we know this guy. Don't trust him. Like, what are you guys doing? Do not trust this guy. He's taking on his fair form again. He's back. And so you want to ebb and flow there.
Yes. The other thing they could do, too, to kind of throw off even, I mean, it's going to, diehard, Middle-earth Tolkien fans are not going to be thrown off. And they're going to have to accept that. They're going to be like, and they know that. They're like, we're not going to trick. This is written. This has been read for decades. Like, there are people who are going to be looking for Annatar and Sauron. And they might even tell other people, like we're doing, about the relationship or the dichotomy of Annatar and Sauron, right?
Yeah.
The light form versus the pure evil, and the possible, not really fleshed out in as far as I've read, struggle between the two, and like how those two, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too meta about it, but the two beings aren't able to reconcile, and it's two extreme sides of one being, right?
Yeah.
And maybe an intended purpose versus a distortion that happens, right? In terms of Anantar and Sauron. But there are many names that he goes by as well. So do you maybe stay away from Anantar, use one of the other names, and try to throw off people like you and I, who are like, oh, crap, okay, well, hold on. Now, who are we talking about here? Like, is this another name that he goes by? We also learned that, Anantar, Sauron, whatever, I think mostly Sauron, the shape-shifting happens. Snake, wolf, all these different physical transformations, metamorphoses that he can take. He can take on different likenesses, which I just learned. Werewolf, I think, is another one, is something that was real big with Morgoth, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a treachery that he would have learned from him. It's something we have not seen, something that would be new to us in Middle-earth in terms of on the screen, and that's something else that could throw us off as well. So even that deceitful nature in his appearance, right? Not only light and dark of the same being, but all right, yeah, he's a werewolf. What? There's werewolves in Middle-earth? Is that right? Am I right on that?
You're right on that. No, 100%. Okay. He actually changed. I think he changes into a bat at one point too, doesn't he? He's like a massive bat or something.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Yes. Again, Ez is just throwing out nonsense now. But
because I can never remember what is Morgoth and what is Sauron. I can't, because I know that Morgoth also does some of that shape shifting.
So I remember. So like that's a tie back to some of the First Age stories, and because we were blown away.
Vampire-like and bats. Yes. Sauron.
Yeah. Beren and Luthien. Weren't we reading when we were reading that story?
Yes.
We were kind of like,
crazy.
Wait, he can do what? Yeah. And so we're like, this is nuts. And actually, we realized throughout the course of the Second Age why he can only take the form that he does take. Once he gets the ring back, when he's fighting in that last alliance sort of battle there. What happens to Sauron, and it has to do with the destruction of Numenor, everything that he did there, LOTR, the whole thing. But I think you're onto something. Could you imagine? I mean, really show us his powers a little bit, like show us some real sorcery, and that would be almost like a nod to he did this in the First Age. There's no reason to think that he cannot continue with those powers or those tricks or whatever, as long as it's not in the sight of someone else. We, the audience, see him walk out of a room full of elves where he just helped them make magical rings. We've bought in for 5 episodes, and we see him shapeshift into something, and we go, holy.
He's a car salesman, man. He's a car salesman.
Pay attention to this guy.
Not just even a bat, but a vampire. He appears as a vampire at least once. I'm looking up real quick. So just there is so much you can do with him. I think that the natural inclination is to be afraid of doing too much with Sauron. And then you lose some sort of mystery or mystique and fear of the unknown, right? I see the opposite. I see this as a golden opportunity to dig deep into who Sauron is, show his complexity, show how scary he is. And then hopefully, I really hope this works backwards, man. I hope it works backwards, and eventually we do get a First Age story, and we can see eventually realized on screen, big or small, whatever, that you thought Sauron was something. Check out Morgoth. Check out his daddy. He was pure evil itself. All right,
Absolutely.
You've seen the Happy Meal. Now, do you want the Big Mac?
Right.
Here you go.
Right.
So I just think it's cool how you can, in a reverse way, like we saw Sauron in Lord of the Rings. But now we can see, going back in time, we can see kind of how crazy he really was and how he was able to, because think about it. In a way, the Sauron at the end of the Second Age is kind of fat, happy, and sassy, right? He's gotten everything under his control. He hasn't had to do all the dirty tricks to get there. So now we get to see the gangster empire on the right. Like I'm thinking about Peaky Blinders, right?
Sure.
Peaky Blinders. You see how many dirty, terrible, bad things that Tommy Shelby has to do to get on top. And eventually we see him as kind of fat and sassy. But we forget that along the way, he had to cut throats. He had to step on necks and break them. Like he did dirty stuff to get there. And Sauron is no exception. And I often think the rise of evil is scarier than evil domination itself. Right, it would be so cool
Yeah.
Peace,
Two
bro.
things. You
Yeah.
made a
All right,
comparison.
cool.
You made a comparison between we've seen the Happy Meal, now show us the Big Mac, and all I could
Yeah,
think of
baby.
was, with Sauron, we've seen the Hamburglar, now show us Ronald McDonald. You know what I mean? And Morgoth, right? Like, you want scary, man? You go from the Hamburglar to Ronald McDonald. That's the big. That's the build
That's
if
hilarious.
they ever get
Oh
those
my
rights. Now,
gosh.
the other thing I wanted to say is I think something that we don't want to miss, and as you say, what they have to do, but the idea like, oh, this is Elrond's time. This is awesome. You see those epic moments where they fought him, but you also can't make him look like a coward and weak. And I don't mean Elrond. I mean Sauron. I mean Anatar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got to make sure that he does look like a boss. Like, almost like he's just a master of deception
Yeah.
and allowing you to have, like, he will humble himself before
Yes. So-
Farazan later on, and just to do that as a tactic to get in,
Yes.
to corrupt and sow seeds of discord. So
I was just going to say, if we do see him as weak, it's gonna have to be in a way that we know that he is playing that to his advantage. He's not truly weak. He's appearing as submissive or cooperative as a way to get, in the same way that he said he would repent and go back to Valinor, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, or when did that change? Was it right at the beginning? Was it deception all along? Or did he realize, nah, I still want to stay here and dominate. Like, I want to become Morgoth. Like, this was the whole reason I'm here. I want to take this place over and be the creator.
Yeah. One thing I'm afraid, I don't want Anatar to turn into Loki, like this super trickster who just seems kind of weak and whatever,
Right.
I actually want him to be flat out scary, but that's why you have two different forms, show him going back and forth, keep us in the dark. But then even once we realize that he can be in both forms, I'm thinking several seasons down the line, we still need to be like, every time he's on screen interacting with a king or whoever, we need to be scared for that individual a little bit.
Yeah.
And almost like, we need to be yelling at the screen going, oh my gosh, I still want that.
Don't trust him.
Yeah. I mean, like, seriously, throw it in the fire now, right? I mean,
yeah.
Like,
so almost to a lesser extent, I guess, because I think they pulled it off perfectly. Andy Serkis, the writers, Fran Philippa and Peter, and then his direction as well, Gollum and Smeagol. Yeah. Like, you feel for Gollum. Like, you're attached to both sides, and whether it's a detest for Gollum and a hope for Smeagol, whatever, you're invested in that like split personality. You're like, geez, I really want Smeagol to win out, but man, Gollum is so fascinating. What can he make happen? In the same way, you want that magnified, I think, because of the sheer power of Sauron.
Yeah.
But you want that same kind of conflict and suspense, right? I always felt like when Smeagol Gollum, especially Return of the King, when he's in some of those scenes, you're like, even now I get chills. I'm like, God, it's creepy.
Yeah.
Like when Sam wakes up and he says, "What were you doing?" And he before he just said, "No, master, it wouldn't be sneaking." And then he goes, "What were you doing?" He goes, "Sneaking." And you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
Scares the crap out of me. Are those conversations he has in the reflection, where in the reflection he's Gollum, and then we see his face and he's Smeagol, and you're like, what in the crap? Right. And he's talking about killing them. And you're like, oh my gosh, horror film-esque.
Right.
Which will lead into another video, and maybe why J.A. Bayona has been chosen as the first director of the show, that he has a background in horror films, and he can pull that off, and he can pull off the creep factor. So,
yeah,
interesting.
Like it. Oh man, okay, covered a lot of ground. This has been fantastic. I don't know.
We'll give such a chase that the three kindred will marvel for years. Okay. They'll count it a marvel. All right. We just need Gimli. We got. You're Aragorn, I'll be Legolas in the situation.
I guess.
I don't know.
We can mix it up. We can share.
Whatever, man.
Whatever.
Share. I mean, was Gandalf running alongside him? Probably.
Probably was. He probably
was.
In spirit,
I'm white.
I think he was.
You can't see me now. I'm clear. Yeah.
Oh, well, they didn't. Yeah. Oh gosh. All right. Well, hey friends, if you have a visualization or an idea or
Yeah.
like
How do
a
you see this
description,
kicking off? How do you
yeah,
see episode one and are making our way into this new epic in Middle Earth? How's it gonna start? What do you think?
yeah, leave us a comment down
Yeah.
below.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, I haven't said this in the last couple of videos, but it does help the channel when you hit that little bell, the little notification bell. You know why, Lane?
Ding ding. Um,
Because we've
yeah.
shifted, right? We're now dropping the you know
Eaves.
what's.
Yeah.
We're dropping them
And
here.
it's YouTube.
On the YouTube.
Standalone.
Yeah.
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 I was gonna say that.
That's what you want to do.
Took out my. What was it?
I took.
You guys can't.
You took, you little. Oh gosh, you see what happens, friends. If you want more of the ramblings, definitely listen to the main show, the podcast,
Yeah.
because we sometimes can't help ourselves. It's pretty wild. We did all the Lord of the Rings. We did Fellowship, Two Towers, Return, and then now we're into the Hobbit. So it's been a great ride over there. We're currently about to jump into what chapter
4.
Chapter 4. Yeah,
We're having Matt Brady on.
yeah. We're gonna have Matt. My good buddy Matt is gonna be on, and we're gonna Faux Hammers.
He might talk about orc cleavage. I don't know.
He might. So
He probably will.
That'll be a special episode next Friday. I think we're recording that. So be sure to check that out. October 30th. So
Yeah, on the eve of Halloween. So it'll be kind of
and
creepy.
also a Zoom chat for all of our patrons.
Zoom
We're
chat,
gonna have
that's
our
right.
patrons on there, which will be a lot of fun. So
I think
go
we're
check
gonna.
that out.
Are we changing it to martinis at Minas Morgul instead of drinks at the Dragon? Because it's a
I
little
think
creepier.
Yeah, I think you said that. Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah, we got to get into the spooky spirit. So,
Yeah.
oh gosh. All right, friends. Well, again, hey, like, subscribe, leave that comment down below, and remember, Bilbo knows.